Hello and welcome back to another episode of Offensively Accurate, hosted by yours truly, Endless Thug, aka White Boy Deep Voice, whatever moniker you want to throw in there. Here to give you the most based and Christian takes on the internet. At least I hope so. So much is going on. You probably read the title, Kamala Crash. It's what it's being called amid all of the financial fears going on. We also have WW3, and we also have what seems to be the beginning of a race war happening in the United Kingdom. Um, can't say I'm shocked at literally any single one of these subjects. If anything, I've been ready for them, and in fact, been waiting for them to happen. Just hoping that things would de-escalate. You know, it'd kind of be funny if I came here and I was like, "Hey, look, everything de-escalated. All of the tensions are no longer there." Never happens like that. It always gets worse. Phil Labonte always talks about how where's the off ramp? It seems to be that we are just not given one, as every single day we get closer and closer to the ridiculous reality of people being violent with each other. So, with that being said, hopefully you enjoy the new change up of the setup. I wanted to go with a bit more professional, a bit more of with modern times than what I was going with. Hopefully you can see me a little bit better too, with the lighting as well. And hopefully we'll have no issues with this new kind of setup going on. I did have to change the camera in a few different angles as well. So, want to remind everybody though, before we do get into the news, I have a couple announcements though. Upcoming creator spotlights are going to still feature Jay Dyer and Wretched Radio. I just haven't gotten a chance or gotten around to that. Kind of, a lot of news going on, plus issues with work. Secondly, if there's any other suggestions in that same frame of people like Wretched Radio and people like Jay Dyer, please send them to me. I would like to do creator spotlights, especially if you don't think I'm familiar with them or you haven't heard me bring them up at all. And then also a huge shout out to What in the World on YouTube, his channel. He's about to break, I think, 16,000 subscribers here on YouTube. Phenomenal thing. His channel's been taken off. He had a few videos that really sparked the algorithm, I guess, and got picked up quite a bit. But that's who I started or I guess we started the podcast with. Jar Openers episode 1, we did that on Saturday. We'll continue to do that on Saturday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. You can get a bit more of a pulled back conservative take than what you're normally going to find here on my individual show. That's no shade at all at War. It just shows that we have both two slightly differing opinions, but we're both on the right wing. One of the ideas for the channel name was going to be like Bearded and Bold or something along those lines. People comment all the time. We both have beards and they both like how they look. But with that, we will be investing into StreamYard to take things up to the next level. And I'm going to be splitting that with him as well. That way we can also get some multi-streaming going on. Not just in the avenue that you're thinking as well, but for us to be able to legitimately co-stream. So not only just to be having it on his page, but I'll be able to route it here through Atlas Thugged as well. And then we can co-stream as well. And then hopefully with that, I'll be able to stream 2x into YouTube at the same time. Maybe I'll add in a few more from there. But as far as I'm working on, those two are really my main profiles. I go to TikTok every now and then. The reality is with TikTok, though, I have to say, the amount of times I get censored or post gets pulled, it just makes the work feel kind of meaningless for the fact that I'm like not making any money on it at all. And I don't see much of an opportunity outside of something going crazy viral on there. Plus, like, the amount of effort to go into like these weird kind of selfie videos to do like one kind of news subject, and then at the chance of it just being nuked out by TikTok, it's not the best. It's not the best deal on the table, I guess is the best way I can say that. So, without further ado, let's get started into this. So in the intro with this lead shot, we're going to go right to me attacking a pastor. But it wasn't really me attacking the pastor. He literally blocked me because he couldn't stand up for himself. Now we're going to go to a couple of smaller things from the day before we do get into the actual news. I just wanted to go to the short one from me, and we'll move on to everybody else from here afterwards. He blocked me for rebuking him publicly literally just straight up heresy. Now, if you can read this here on screen, I can actually make it a little bit bigger as well. And I wrote here, another pastor who refuses to respond, only blocks so they can continue to poison the well. If all it takes is a layman like me to turn a screeching progressive to hushed whispers, the churches are way more worthless than I originally thought. So you're probably wondering, what was this argument about? And so I can't see his post because he blocked me, and so that's the unfortunate aspect of it. I actually do need to give a shout out to 9mm SMG for someone who says, you need to constantly make sure that you're taking screenshots of posts you're going to go against, because once it's blocked, You're not going to get it again. You're not going to be able to see it. So I can't even really show it to you. But the gist of it was very simple. He pointed to Matthew chapter 19, verse 12 specifically, as an affirmation of Jesus's affirmation of an intersex individual. Um, Bonkers, but doing so in the name of being politically correct to try to give some kind of weak, fake, I guess, confirmation from the Christian perspective that what's going on with the Olympics and these boxers with the XY chromosomes, um, that it's actually like, it's we need to apologize along those lines. But really, the big point of the issue is the fact that he was saying that Jesus affirmed intersex, which I outright rebuked. Now I'll go into it real quick. And I said here, every day I swear I see another insane post attempting to force progressive ideas into Christianity. And I put the screenshot of a eunuch here from the dictionary because eunuch is what's specifically used in verse 12 to make this example. And this definition right here says a man who has been castrated, especially in the past, one employed to guard the women's living areas in an Asian court. If you're familiar, one of the more common examples from more recent times would be the Game of Thrones. I can't remember what that specific group of men was called, but they are the slaves that Khaleesi had freed. And it would be a common occurrence for them to be castrated individuals if they're going to be dedicating their life to the service of the Queen's Guard. Archaic, but that was a practice back in the day. And you can see it was Mr. Kevin Young is the pastor who blocked me. He didn't even respond. I didn't even offer any kind of ounce of an answer or rebuttal to what I had put forward. And it's obviously why. And so I go on to say, Matthew 19, 1 through 12 is about divorce. And if you read the whole chapter, and specifically the gist of it, and I won't read my tweet word for word, but I'll put it on screen though. The gist of it is that the disciples are asking, to Jesus, then what substantiates a divorce inside of a marriage? And they even bring up, why was Moses allowed to give this one specific woman a certificate of divorce? And so Jesus goes on to say, actually, like that was then, this is now. Really, the level of commitment you need is absolute, near perfection. You're going to be joined as one, etc., etc. And to which the disciples say, if this is the situation between a husband and wife, it is better not to marry. Kind of showing their bit of shock or at least kind of resistance to the idea of like, whoa, that seems like way too much, even for a disciple. It's like, well, that's like kind of an insane amount of commitment required. And so Jesus kind of responds to that saying, not everybody can accept that, but only those to whom it has been given, which then leads into his reference of the eunuchs, because he says there's three different kinds: ones that are born that way, right? Ones that might be born with some kind of birth defects, or someone that's born with just a non-functional, genitalia. Those who are made that way by others, which would talk about forcibly it being done, whether it was through kind of some slave trade or some kind of military action, or maybe just outright punishment. But then lastly, he emphasizes in those who choose it of themselves, drawing the point of, marriage is really, this lifestyle is in the same frame of commitment, and you need to have this level of conviction to stick to it and be holistically aligned with what Jesus and what the Father would want you to be. And so he points to the way that the eunuchs who chose to do that as their lifestyle as the level of conviction required in marriage. And it was in no way a reference to intersex. So once again, it brings a broader point, which is, if a very simple individual like me who doesn't, I'm not a theologian, I'm not a pastor, can very easily kind of dismantle these ridiculously progressive ideas, it just goes to show that there's so many churches and so many pastors who are absolutely worthless and literally wolves in sheep's clothing. They're going to lead you straight to hell. These ideas are just insane, and it just saddens me to watch it every single day be pushed by people who are supposed to be guarding the hearts and souls of the individuals in their flock when they choose to not to. So just an aside point before we move into things, we'll go to this here. This is actually another kind of a halfway announcement for anyone who's actually curious and using some kind of image generator or AI image generator. It really doesn't get better than the Gab AI one. And even on the free plan, you get like limited uses, but it's like the full reign of the entire thing of what it can do, the whole armada. Different characters as well. But I think the biggest selling point is it doesn't censor anything politically. So you can kind of get some really kind of cool generations out of there, seeing how like these pictures of Trump and Kamala and these soldiers from the UK, all of these very, very current modern time reference ones. It's pretty funny. So we'll go to some of these other smaller pieces before we get into the actual main stuff. This is from the leading report. Nancy Pelosi said the U.S. should add Biden to Mount Rushmore, which is just, again, absurd. I think, if anything, the funniest edit I saw of this actually was Biden's head turned around and him walking in the opposite direction. And if anything, that would be fitting, and I wouldn't mind it being added to Mount Rushmore if they would kind of mock him in that regard. But it shows, again, the tribalism and the cult kind of like a cult-like worship between these two groups, even the left and the right, towards the leaders in the party. It's just insane. But again, we all know, for the most part, people on the left don't mean what they say. They just go along with the song and dance because otherwise the mob will consume you. And then in other news, it turns out that it has been confirmed by both boxers have tested positive for XY chromosomes. And it was confirmed by the International Boxing Association, which is the IBA. Now, this is from Mario Fall. It says, breaking, both female boxing Olympians tested positive for XY chromosomes. The International Boxing Association confirmed that both of them tested positive for them. Now, it said that they were given a chance to appeal these findings, with the Lynn, the lesser-known one, not, and then the more-known one, Aman Khalif, choosing to do so. But it seems that appeal was clearly it wasn't met, and they both were confirmed to have XY chromosomes. So just a side point, to go back to that narrative in the media, which everybody was kind of asking for apologies because it hadn't been confirmed if it was an XY chromosome, and in fact, like, they actually are all women, and here's science to disprove a lot of that. And again, there's a short snippet there. We don't need to go into that though. Moving to more important things. Now, I would like to go to a bit from Jamie Raskin though. Now, this kind of caught me off guard because I saw it on X earlier, didn't think it was anything crazy at all. Namely because it was being posted by, I believe, Matt Wallace, who's somebody I don't take opinion very too seriously. But then I saw it on Alex Jones, and then I was like, okay. Once I see it on Alex Jones, I'm like, okay, I'll give it a second look and kind of look into this. So I got one from Chuck Callisto. So let me go here first. Let me go and fix this real quick. Now, one of the things I do want to say before I preface this is because of Alex Jones bringing it up, I looked into it a little bit further, and I did find it to be very, very odd. So it's Jamie Raskins, and it's representative. And what's up, Donnie? Nice to see you in here. He said, like, we need to check their chromosomes. We do have eyes. And I think, if anything, that's really the argument there, right? Is it's very overtly obvious to people who are watching that these two individuals are exhibiting physical characteristics of men. And then thus, in the comparison of the females they're up against, you can go, whoa, there's a huge disparity there. But again, I think to you and I and most people, I think that these things are very exuberantly obvious, and therefore it feels like a bit of a slap in the face when people say otherwise. And it probably drives a bit of the controversy as well, because people get kind of rage baity about it. But let me go here though. This is from Chuck Callisto. Now, I did write a little section down here to make sure I was in line with it. So he claims Congress is going to stop Trump on January 6th in 2025. Now, he says they're going to do so by invoking the 14th Amendment, and in particular, I believe it's going to be Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. In this, really, though, they're essentially going to invoke that he is going to be disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, right before, obviously, they would put him into office. Now, clearly, this is going to set up some kind of crazy conditions, but you can hear it for yourself. And matter of fact, let me make sure my headphones are going to be correct. Should have done that before I switched these screens here. Got to do these new, using my wife's Apple AirPod Pros to do a lot better than the other ones I got. Especially these other ones I got are a lot cheaper. Let me go ahead and connect this real quick. Okay, all good. We'll go ahead and give it a listen. If anybody in the chat, if the volume is too high, too low, please let me know. I will adjust it accordingly.
What can be put into the Constitution can slip away from you very quickly. And the greatest example going on right now before our very eyes is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which they're just disappearing with a magic wand, as if it doesn't exist, even though it could not be clearer what it's stating. And so, they want to kick it to Congress. So it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025, to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody and Civil War conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but these justices who have.
Before he goes into the justices, just right there, already kind of dumping all of the burden of what may possibly be the civil strife and violence, clearly completely biased on Trump supporters alone. And once again, where's the off ramp? Here, once again, an escalation being put forward, probably knowing what this is going to do and induce before we even get to this point, and then thus seeing as well the Supreme Court also saying that Trump's sentencing will happen in September. Again, where's the off ramp?
Not many cases to look at every year, not that much work to do, a huge staff, great protection, simply do not want to do their job and interpret what the great 14th Amendment means. And I'm glad that Sherilyn's creating her new center so we can bring that, what can be.
And so then he also throws the Supreme Court under the bus, if you will, because he disagrees with the fact that they haven't taken this up sooner. But again, this would clearly induce Civil War conditions, kind of wild that he even brought that up himself. I think we shouldn't be surprised that the left is saying, again, the quiet part out loud. I just find it to be, do they really think they can kind of pull off the stunt again? And then also seeing the parallel comparison with what's going on in the UK before we get to that, I don't think it bodes well at all. I think people seeing how these kind of conflict is going to go, it's going to take place. I think it just opens the door for a lot of very, very terrible things to happen. And we'll get into the UK unrest here towards the end as well. But many people are already kind of tabbing that to be a trap, similar to what's going to end up happening, or what did happen with January 6th, where essentially is a big honeypot. They get all these names and faces from all the videos that get uploaded, and then there's your most rabid activists who you might slightly disagree with, but are clearly going to put the work in, are now rounded up all in one fell swoop and disappeared for whoever knows how long. Now, here in the States, we clearly have a lot more protections that you're supposed to have that make these things a lot harder to accomplish from these people. But in the UK, you can't say the same, let alone, you could draw an African American in an impolite manner, and that would be enough to get you a hate crime. So my heart does go out to what may possibly and probably will be a lot of arrest and probably people seeing the light of day for the last time. Now, here in the States, we don't kind of play around when it comes to the appealing and working the court system when it goes to defending some of these people, so we can get some of these sentences reduced. I would imagine we're going to see the opposite in the UK. If it does end up being a trap, if they do end up letting up and allowing a lot of them to get arrested without doing proper things like hiding, it's going to look bad. It's going to not even just look bad, it's going to bear bad for the UK, because then obviously the problem just continues, and thus you've given them an excuse to be, hey, look at these Nazis. We need to do worse next time. We need to make sure these speech laws go an extra level, because clearly it wasn't enough. And they'll find different avenues and way to force along this ridiculousness, which is all of the illegal immigration that's happening. So, stepping up into the first title, though, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow me on X, follow on TikTok, follow on Spotify, and share this show if you enjoy it. So we're going to catch back up with the latest on Kamala. So Kamala cannot speak. Everybody knows this, but she continues to try, and it continues to screech into everyone's ears. It is awful to listen to sometimes, not because, well, I mean, I don't hate women, but I do hate the way she sounds, but because there's a possibility that this is the president for the next 4 years. And that, my friends, is more terrifying than many things I can even think of. More terrifying than even the worst nightmares I probably had. So we'll go ahead and listen to her plan to take on inflation, and you tell me if you can understand this toddler nonsense.
What else are you going to do to fix this problem with inflation?
All right, thank you. Well, let's start with this. Prices have gone up, and families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources. That's about a source of stress for families that is not only economic, but is on a daily level, something that is a heavy weight to carry. So it is something that we take very seriously. very seriously. And we know from the history of this issue in the United States that when you see these prices go up, it has a direct impact on the quality of life for all people in our country. So
She's literally saying, price go up, everybody's sad. Like, dude, like, bro, what
it's a
is
big
this?
issue, and we take it seriously. And it is a priority, therefore.
What
I wouldn't know, like, who is training her to talk. And I can't imagine that they haven't had somebody paired alongside her for the last 4 years being like, Kamala, you have to, like, you need to find a new way to say things because you're getting too many bad audio clips. Because how many is this, dude? Just in like the last couple of weeks, I swear half my outline is literally Kamala clip this, Kamala clip this. I'm like, dude, like she's awful. And then you realize it's not even that, you know, they're trying to like just, it's just she's like literally retarded. She's just like, she's not fit for the job. And I think if anything that speaks to that, one, she's like literally not even being, you know, selected and by a democratic process. She's being installed through superdelegation. I don't think that there's a chance that anyone else could be the nominee at this point. I think she's essentially been confirmed with how many superdelegates she got. But again, no body of work, no policies to run off of, just she's a black woman. I mean, like, that's literally it. If you want me to be as honest as possible, that is essentially exactly what all she has. And again, aided by the fact in that concert where it's Megan Thee Stallion and it's like, shake my ass, shake my ass. Like, that's all that she had. And that's the only reason they were able to fill the stadium, and forgive my language. Donnie's saying, someone explained inflation to her like she was a child and she is just regurgitating it. You would think that even the teleprompter would help her out more than what it seems to be. But anytime she seemingly speaks off script, it's terrible. But I think you're right. And I think she did her best to remember exactly what the person said. And so she could just think of like the ideas, right? It was like, inflation, bad, hurts people like you and I. You know, like was a robot kind of assisting her through this? Like, I don't know. But again, plenty of this to come down the line, man. We're just getting started. This was earlier from today. This is an absolute zinger, and this is about wokeness, not inflation. Now, she seems a bit more herself when she says that, less so like she was being trained, but man, it's just as bad. Joey Minorino says this is the only 13 seconds Trump needs to play on repeat for the next 92 days to win the election. We'll take a listen.
You know, we have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke. Yeah. You know,
like, insane. And I think it's even less insane, but for what she's saying, I can expect like her saying that, and then all the people who are on the left who are like very low IQ being like, oh yeah, man, dude, you don't want to be too woke, man. You gotta be just woke enough. And they find that to make sense. It's the laughing, dude. The laughing is so uncomfortable. I want you to take a look at this lady. This lady, look at her eyes. She seems very, very, very uncomfortable. Like, you know, not even any ounce of body language to like affirm what Kamala's saying, just like frozen. Like, I can't believe she just said this. But I don't even know if it's because of what she's saying. I think it's just the laughing is so vibe breaking, I guess is the way to immersion breaking, because you're in the conversation and you're like, dude, what you're saying doesn't deserve a laugh with it. Why are you doing this? This is so awkward. This is so utterly delirious, right? But again, I think it follows that same trend with Hillary Clinton, where because she is so outwardly unfavorable and unappealing to, I think, a broader audience, she's continually given the advice, maybe even an earpiece, which I doubt possibly, but even, you know, probably after and before the fact, forgive me, you got to smile more. You got to laugh more. And that's like the only way she can get it done is by cackling crazily, like a witch in between every other breath. Not even every other word, almost every other breath. And I think that deserves a replay, honestly. We'll start from the beginning.
to be woke.
Like, it's insane. The coconut tree clip is phenomenal. I've seen that one before. I mean, if anything, they use that one as like, that's the best thing she's ever said. Like, proud of that clip. But that was a lot shorter than the first one we did watch. But we're going to go to talk a bit about the debate drama going around. Now, I might have a differing opinion from those that are in the mega cult. I'm actually going to use that after seeing what happened with the Kyle Rittenhouse stuff. This is from Kamala Harris talking about the debate in particular. It's interesting how anytime, any place becomes one specific time, one specific safe space. I didn't know she worded it like that. I'll be there on September 10th, like he agreed to. I hope to see him there. And now, obviously, if you're not aware, Donald Trump did back out of the September 10th debate that was going to be scheduled as the number 2 debate with Joe Biden. Now, clearly, that debate was scheduled with Joe Biden and not Kamala Harris. Now, what I will say on this is I think that Trump, knowing that he's going to have opposition no matter where he goes, I mean, obviously Fox News a little less, Fox News has been getting pretty bad here in the last couple of years, hence the reason why Tucker Carlson's no longer there. You have to think about it like this. I think this might be the only point that Kamala has, period. I don't know why Trump would not want to just continue with the regular debate on September 10th with Kamala Harris. Now, obviously, he already did one with Biden in an extremely hostile territory. I can't remember who hosted the original one. It might have been CNN, but ABC was going to host this next one. But clearly, I don't think there's going to be another debate before the election. Now, seemingly, they're both not going to agree to it. Kamala said she's not agreeing to the one on September 17th hosted by Fox News, and then Donald Trump obviously backing out of the originally scheduled one that was with Joe Biden. So I will give him that. It was supposed to be with Joe Biden. Although I don't find Kamala Harris to be that scary or odd or hard to debate against. So seeing him kind of back out was kind of eye-opening, because I was just like, the momentum's kind of in the bag for you, Trump. Just kind of show up and let her speak, honestly. You should do well. Kind of like how he did in the first one. But he did back out. So I would be surprised if there was a debate before the election at this point. And then Donald saying, or Donnie, forgive me, she always sounds like a stoned friend trying to get deep. Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like the only time this person ever talks about, conspiracy theories is when they're like absolutely beyond baked, like sinking into the corner of a couch. I get that vibe too. I think, that kind of echoes the sentiment that Michael Malice put on with Joe Rogan in his recent episode, where he was specifically saying, I think she's a wine mom, right? She's like a too deep wine mom. Is there any time where she's not drunk, like woohoo, like kind of partying around? It's just like being awkwardly secondhand embarrassment, just magnet. I mean, we're getting plenty of fun out of this. Really, we got the old man and we got the wine mom, right? There's plenty of fun and entertainment to be had around here. And welcome in for everybody who's coming in and joining the chat. Make sure you say what's up to Donnie and don't let him be the only chatter in here. Let's go to the next one here. The back and forth of Trump and Kamala. And this is from Sean Fitzgerald. Now, what he says with this is kind of opposite of me. He says the lying is unstoppable. Trump had an agreement with Biden, the guy the Dems initiated a coup against when they installed Kamala. And again, because he's quoting the fact that Mediate put out that Trump backed out of an ABC News debate with Harris while agreeing with a Fox News one to debate Harris. Now, once again, I don't think that that's any ounce of a lie. I think that's pretty accurate. Trump backed out of the debate because it's going to be Harris instead of Biden, right? Now, he could have just stayed in there and then had Kamala Harris. I'm really not sure what that changes outside of wanting to find a more favorable ground to host it. But even at that, I think I would just take him up on the offer and go ahead and go with the debate, because I would think that the Trump team would not be scared of Kamala, given the fact that they already have a playbook on how to take her down, especially anything that she's done pre-2020, because you just go and you grab what Tulsi Gabbard did in a 46-second clip and you just repeat the line. End of quote, repeat the line. Like, you just do it one more time, because that stuff is so damning against how Kamala took care of herself as the prosecutor days. In her prosecutor days, I should say. She's a fanny pack personified. Yes. Just cringe. like it's like, ew. Like, it's just cringe. Like, even its existence is cringe. Like, it's not even that you're wearing it. It's like, just go put that in the closet, man. But it is from Sean Fitzgerald, Actual Justice Warrior. So then will be one of our first longer clips here. We get a load of BS from ABC anchor with Byron Donalds. We can go ahead and watch this. This is about Kamala's heritage and her background. And if anybody had watched the previous episode with me and World, we covered pretty extensively that she acknowledged that she was Indian American for quite a long time, specifically with two major clips. The first one being some kind of reality TV show or production that was done with the Indian star from The Office. I can never remember what her actual name is, but she's the one who's always in love with Ryan, who's another character in the show. And they ran a nice segment because she's like, I didn't think we would have an Indian American senator. Like, it's kind of crazy we're going to be an Indian woman senator. And Kamala's like, yep. And I eat South Indian food. And like, they are going on these tangents. The second one that backs that up is also a report before she took the Senate seat, with him being like, man, are you proud to be the first U.S. Indian senator? And she's like, you better knock on wood. Again, completely acknowledging and affirming that she was accepting the Indian identity until now. Now, this is from Benny Johnson. Now, he says, Byron wiped the floor with George Stephanopoulos over Kamala's heritage. George, I don't understand why you keep on repeating it. Byron says, I'm not the one who keeps repeating it. You keep bringing it up. Now, it did get a little bit more heated than what is in the description, I should say. And again, hats off to Byron in this transaction, because the way that the host was talking to him would get me up and out of my seat. But again, that's also just me. So go ahead and take a listen. Anything up with the sound, please let me know in chat. I will adjust accordingly.
And you just repeated the slur again. If it doesn't matter, why do you all keep questioning her identity? She's always identified as a black woman. She is biracial. She has a Jamaican father and an Indian mother. She's always identified as both. Why are you questioning that?
Well, George, first of all, this is something that's actually a conversation throughout social media right now. There were a lot of people who are trying to figure this out. But again, that's a side issue, not the main issue. The main issue.
Sir, 1 second. You just did it. You just did it again.
Of the United States.
Why do you insist on questioning her racial identity?
You want me to talk?
I want you to answer my question.
George, now that you're done yelling at me, let me answer. He talked about it on the stage yesterday in Atlanta for 2 minutes? He spent more than 35, 40 minutes going after her record, talking about how radical of a senator that she was. She was the most liberal senator in the United States, in the United States Senate. That is a fact. He talked about the job that she did as vice president of the United States, a job, I will add, which has been a failure for the American people. I know you guys like to glom on to this that he talks about in jest or in a serious manner for about a minute or so, but what you do not cover is the litany of failures of Kamala Harris. That's what you're not covering, George.
So questioning somebody's racial identity for a couple minutes is okay?
George, I'm going to tell you again, he brought it up. AP is the one that wrote the headline when she first came in to the United States Senate. Didn't talk about her being black, talked about her being the first Indian American senator.
And I'm glad he reinforced that too. Like, I'd be like, dude, you better calm down, man. Kamala herself has said that she is an Indian, dude. Do not sit here and act like I'm out here like attacking her for her race. That's outrageous.
AP brought that up. I mean, George, we could have this conversation for the entire segment, but none of this matters to the American people. What matters to the American people is, are we going to have the same policies of the Biden-Harris administration that has been destructive of the American people, or are we going to have the policies of the Trump administration, which put America first, had low inflation, prosperous Americans, no matter your race, no matter your color, no matter your creed, and a foreign policy that kept America safe? Those are the facts that truly matter, because this issue is going to come and go. The lives of the American people is what's going to remain, and that's what matters more than anything else.
If it doesn't matter, I don't understand why you keep on repeating it, why the president keeps on repeating it, why those introducing the president yesterday
George,
keep on
actually,
repeating
I'm not
it.
the one who keeps repeating it. George, you're the one that's bringing it up now. That's you.
You've done it,
I understand why
sir.
You've done it.
You've done it 3 times.
Because see, I don't even think it's a matter of like it's being brought up that it's an issue. I'd go at the host and be like, dude, are you gonna sit here and lie to the American public that you're completely unaware of like her having years of her career acknowledging that she's an Indian and now she's changing her identity? Like, you want to play that card? Like, I would have pressed a lot harder than where Byron was at. But again, it seems to me that Byron's trying to keep his appearances and optics as publicly favorable as possible.
Every single answer you gave me. Now let me finish, sir.
George,
every single answer you gave, you repeated the slur.
Asked me, George. That's why I'm pushing back on you now. George, you asked me the question 3 times. I responded, but I'm.
And every single time you repeat the slur. That is exactly my point. You simply can't say that it's wrong.
George, so then what you're saying,
Now it's
so then
a
what you,
slur.
and I want to get off this topic because it's not the only thing that's going on. But George, now you're saying that AP is the one that slurred Kamala Harris, because those are the facts. You can go to the internet and look at the clips, George, if you want to, or we can talk about this now. I prefer to talk about the future of our country, because the American people are struggling. The American people do need serious policy decisions to be made, and they need serious leadership on the world stage. Kamala Harris has not proven that she can do that. Donald J. Trump has proven that he can do that.
I mean, look at this smug dude. Like, you lying son of a, like, dude, playing these stupid games, man. But again, that was going viral for quite some time. This is from Johnny Megan, Benny Johnson, 4.5 million views. Again, I have no idea who that host is, but he's just absolutely making a fool of himself too. Again, you know, he's not even doing a really, honestly, good effort to try to convince people of the lie. But again, I also probably would have went a lot harder, a lot sooner than where Byron was at. So to keep moving forward, though, on the update with Kamala as we get to the market crash, I'm hoping this is AI. But this is also going to go in line with the thought of why it was that leak that was reported, I think, by Ian Miles Chong regarding who the vice president pick would be for Kamala Harris. Now, this is from Laura Loomer, and I'm hoping this picture is AI. But she says, "What do the signs say, Michelle?" Now, this is posted from the Democrats' official account. Now, we'll go here. This is an image clearly showing Michelle signs. Now, obviously, everybody knows that would be Big Mike. Terrifying, because it also would unify a ticket which would have two black women on it, right? I mean, one's probably Indian, the other's a man, but who knows? And I think it goes in line with the same thing that Ian Miles Chong had reported on, which was the supposed leak that was them confirming that Josh Shapiro would be selected as the vice president. This seems to be also another kind of float it out and see what the reaction is, adjust accordingly. So who knows if this is actually a true leak, or maybe it's this absolute bait to see what the public's reaction was going to be to such an announcement, or at least some kind of a pseudo announcement, seeming how it came from the Democrats' account as well, one that would definitely be picked up by a lot of left-wing sources too. So moving forward as well, we're going to get into the Kamala crash beginning. So this account called it way ahead of time. And what's funny is Jim Cramer, if you're familiar with him, actually had a tweet as well that he posted. And he's like, some of these NASDAQ futures looks like it's the end of the world. And he's like, well, I got to tell you something. It isn't. And then 12 hours later, we see some of the most ridiculous crashes in the market, not even just here, but in Japan as well. So let's go here. This is from some random account that actually is a bit bigger than what I expected it to be. It's called Oprah DJT, and they actually called this a while ago, said a black swan event is incoming. This is the future with Kamala Harris. And he actually kind of called it almost to the T. Not sure who he is, but it had 2.8 million views. So shout out to this random guy. He's probably got his finger on the pulse of a financial market, I would imagine. Now, this is, speaking of James Cramer, we're going to go to him actually giving an endorsement, seeing what's going on with the market. This is CNBC's Jim Cramer. If you care about your paycheck, you'll go with Trump. Now, obviously shocking for a bit, because Jim Cramer has always been, at least for the past, as far as I can remember, being in the left-wing side of things. And this is him. This is about 1 minute and 11 seconds long. I think it's actually with the host we just saw with Byron Donalds, if I'm not if I am correct. We'll go ahead and take a listen and see here, giving his kind of hesitant endorsement of Donald Trump.
I'd like to know, the 4x100 must knows.
Does he know what? He knows who's going to win?
I'm just saying that. And who's the vice president? We don't know who's the vice presidential candidate is.
No, we're going to find that out.
And how about Tony West surfacing? My guy,
Tony
I
West.
said Tony West would make it so that you'd have to rethink how left Kamala is. I think people should do that. Tony West.
We are waiting
PepsiCo,
for the
Tony
vice
West,
presidential
general counsel
decision
at
of
Uber.
Vice President Harris.
I know Tony. He's what I regard as a business person. There was no business person really that close to Biden except for Gina Raimondo. So this is a nice change of pace. There's a lot of business people surrounding Harris. If you're in the stock market, if you care about your paycheck, you go with Trump. If that's what you do.
You do?
Yeah, well, he wants to cut your taxes.
Well, he wants to cut taxes.
Your taxes.
My taxes got raised enormously,
well,
as you know, under the
cut
last Trump administration.
I don't know if he wants to cut your president.
No. I'm in a blue state.
Oh, yeah, no, forget you're out.
They want to kill
out.
us.
I tried to reorganize. I tried to go to.
They want to put us out of business.
Pennsylvania.
That's
it's not
what
as
they
easy
want
as
to
I
do to
thought.
us.
So that you can clearly see, we don't have to play the rest of that. That was them playing cover up and damage control after Jim Cramer said the quiet part out loud once again. Although in the favorable aspect, I'm in the one where occasionally the truth comes out on the good side. But again, was shocking to see this quote alone for Jim Cramer to kind of endorse Donald Trump. Obviously, the host there had to play the opposite of the field because how dare they ever even entertain the fact they may be thinking or on the fence of anything. That's how tribalistic this stuff is. So the headline, though, today, over 2 trillion. That's over 2 trillion now at this point. This is an earlier number from about 7 hours ago. And again, 9:48 a.m. is from this. There's almost 10 million views here from Raw's alerts. 2 trillion has been wiped out from the U.S. stock market so far today as the NASDAQ has dropped over 1,000 points. Officials say the NASDAQ has never been this low, not even intraday. And now, clearly, fear is driving a lot of what we're seeing in the market and what we see, obviously, around the globe, seeing everything go on as well. And the election doesn't help anything, given that so many people have the belief that so much of their finances and economic impact revolves around that decision. Thus, many, many huge swings. And this comes after the news of, I believe, Warren Buffett, who sold half of his Apple stock. When I saw that a couple of days ago, I think, it might have even been just 2 days ago, I had a feeling that something pretty vast is coming. Because you don't just sell half of your stock in Apple over a whim. So we'll go ahead and take a listen to what Fox Business had to say in this 30-second clip here.
Some would call history in the making. Scary. Don't say that.
We have never been down 1,000 points ever, not even intraday on the NASDAQ.
Is that true?
That is true.
Okay. Down 6% right from the get-go. This is heavy big tech. Here we go. Look at them go down. Microsoft is down $20. That's 5%. Alphabet, 5%. Meta, 6%. Amazon, 6%. Apple, 9% down. Let's pull out Apple. This is interesting. A question for you. Some would call history in the making.
I didn't realize the specifics of that, but Apple being down 10% is kind of insane. But again, seemingly that's what Warren Buffett sold half of his stock for. Probably also has to do with the fact why it's a good bit more than the other ones as well. Here's an image of some of these losses, and this is from Watch Your Guru on Twitter. Just then, and again, he's repeating the line, 1.93 trillion. It's a bit more than that now. But you can see this is a massive photo here of all these accounts. So the leaders of electronic technology, both NVIDIA is down 11.5%. If you're not familiar with, they make a lot of graphics cards, GPUs, processors. They are a PC company. And the same likes of Apple as well. Google, Microsoft, Meta there as well. Looks like Netflix is suffering too. Adobe. What are some of these other ones we can recognize? This is from finance. Can't remember what BH stands for, but this is JP Morgan. Wells Fargo is here. Bank of America is up here. American Express too, showing in size proportion to the size of the squares. None that's out here really shocking, although some are up. I can tell what I don't see is Lockheed Martin, and I don't remember if I even grabbed one of those for the actual outline, but Lockheed Martin as well had a huge spike upwards. Obviously, with the fact of impending warfare, clearly they would be rising their stocks right now. So this has led to major trading platforms shutting down to slow down the rate of trades. They say outages, but clearly, I mean, most people understand it's an attempt to kind of at least slow down the panic and slow down the volume of which everything is happening so people can get a better grasp on recouping their money from the top levels, as well as those who are running these trades to ensure that the entire market doesn't just fall out from underneath them. This is from Mario Nafal. This is breaking major trading platforms down, and reports indicate that several major retail trading platforms are currently experiencing outages. I'm not sure if they currently are right now, but this was from, again, earlier this morning, from about 9 hours ago. Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, Vanguard, E-Trade, and Fidelity. Now, what he didn't have on there as well, Robinhood, yes, Robinhood was disrupted as well. He did add that here. Significant market volatility. And again, he sourced for that was Business Insider, NerdWallet, and Schwab as well. Seems a bit wild, given the fact of what's going on with the economy too. And hopefully anybody is not experiencing such major losses themselves too. So one of the funnier aspects as well was the Intel CEO literally posted a Bible verse. And this went viral as well. Pat Gelsinger posted a Bible verse saying, "Let your eyes look straight ahead, fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet and be steadfast in all your ways." And I think a lot of people took that as oh Lord, this looks terrible. Now again, Intel looks like it's down 55%. That's a very awful, awful image. Now that's from the year to date down. So again, huge major losses in the last year for Intel. But again, very grim earnings call apparently is what led to that. So we have a reaction from a resident dissident finance man from Ian Carroll responding to what we see here. Now this is what he says. He says, as we go forward, remember, the markets often settle down. People will buy thinking this is the bottom. It's not. He says, sit tight. Today will echo throughout history. We will probably see big bank collapses this year, and they will try to bail them out with our tax dollars again. When do we acknowledge the Fed is the problem? And I think he's got a good point there. Are we really doomed to repeat the same problems over and over and over again? Is that just simply what human nature truly is? I'm beginning to believe that more and more by the day, seeing how we seem to not be able to escape our sinful ways. And that, again, leads to violence and robbery, not in the violent form, but in larger forms, white-collar type of crime. So senior Biden economic advisor Gene Sperling also quit yesterday in news of everything going on, obviously wanting to take it out now and not wanting to fall on the sword in the moment and then be, the useful idiot that is the sacrificial lamb for what's going on, making sure he gets out ahead of time and on his own, resigning on his own end. So let me go here. Before we get into the next subject, we'll take a break from one of the heavier bit of news and go ahead and clear some of these tabs out as well. The Mr. Beast drama obviously is still continuing amid everything going on, although following out of the news cycle a bit, obviously seeing how some of this stuff is playing out. Now, there was a large dispute that happened over third-party extensions, and that's because YouTube does not show likes on the app anymore. And because YouTube doesn't show likes on the app anymore, people use third-party plugins to see what the actual dislike ratio is. And so I'll go here. And the supposed high number that the quartering is saying is what is the actual dislike ratio is what's being disputed. So I'll go ahead and pull this up on screen now. This is from the quartering saying that Mr. Beast's new video nearing 1 million dislikes in just 4 hours. He says, I don't think this is going away, buddy. Now, I don't see a community note, and this tweet has been out for quite a bit amid the controversy. This is from August 3rd, too. So I'd imagine if he was outright provably wrong, we would have a community note there. And some people have said that the quartering is wrong on this, but Jake the Viking has also come out and said, no, it actually is this high. And I have to be honest, it was late the other night, and this video was in the recommended feed of my wife's YouTube. I wanted to take a listen because I was curious if there was any kind of vibe shift or energy shift. Not because I support Mr. Beast in any form at all, but really to kind of bask in the glory of how good Mr. Beast's videos would be, like if it didn't have nonstop cameos from a transsexual, and it was decently enjoyable. But again, you can't see anything on the dislike ratio. But again, there was no kind of even statement or even half outreach towards what was going on in the macro regarding the Ava and Chris Tyson situation. But I don't think it's been confirmed either way. I did see a screenshot provided by somebody from Mr. Beast's team that did indeed show, forgive me, that showed that there was only around 40,000 dislikes. It was actually a lot less than what was being shown in these third-party extensions. So who knows? I think one of the big points is that Jake the Viking, forgive me, that he brought up was, when have we ever disputed any of these third-party extensions dislike ratios on any of these other big, YouTubers who have these big fallouts? But we do now for Mr. Beast. Doesn't make much sense. Thank you very much, Titan. I appreciate that very much. Thank you for the super chat. Titan says, history paints a very telling picture that we are doomed to repeat the mistakes, especially when we follow man and not God. How many empires must collapse? I think you're spot on with that. 100% spot on with that. It's something that I've been thinking about for quite a bit. In regards, and this is kind of an aside from what we were just talking about, going to what Titan here is saying. Especially given the regards of the constant escalation that I spoke about at the very beginning of this video, that it seems like there's no off ramp. We're never given an off ramp. I wish I could come and sit down and be like, hey, looks like the tensions died. Looks like people are making peace. These people apologize for lying. it's like it just doesn't happen that way. It's like we're kind of bound to be in this kind of primal human nature where even when wrong, the selfishness overrides everything, and thus we look for reasons to justify our ill wills, and rather we fall into these patterns of justifying the ends or justifying the means via the ends. And so it's rather unfortunate in the whole. But I think I am trying not to be black-pilled about all of these things, given the fact of someone who wants to be a rather forward-facing Christian populist and Christian nationalist. I would like to hold the hope that we can move away from these things. I think it is possible to move away from these things. As such, I like to reference a really good movie, one of the best movies actually, The Gladiator. And it's when Marcus Aurelius, in the very beginning of the movie, is telling, before he gets assassinated by his son, he's telling Maximus, he's like, what do you think Rome is? And, Maximus tells him, Rome is the light. He's like, I've been out here for the past 12 years on this campaign, in this war, and it's really truly shown me how dark the rest of the world is. And now that I understand that Rome provides this structure, Rome is the beacon of light. And then he asks him, be the heir, be the emperor. And Maximus says, no, I would rather just go home with my wife and kids. And then Marcus Aurelius says this. He says, this is precisely the reason why you should be the emperor. It's because you are a man who would turn down power. I like to think, and again, similar to George Washington as well, I like to think that people like that do still exist, and that they're thus the putting forward Christian populism and Christian nationalism as the mainstay of how we operate in the infrastructure of the government. I have hope that we can possibly do these things again. And maybe it is just an accepted fact of empires collapse because of corruption. But I think that shouldn't black pill us out of wanting to be the light and wanting to continue to constantly build, no matter how many times it may fall. Because again, a really good point from Andrew Wilson all the time is that he says, we're not Christians for the outcomes, we're Christians for the morals. And so I think with that alone, you just go, yeah, okay, we're not doing this just for an outcome. We're doing this because this is what we're supposed to be doing. And then Titan also saying we will definitely move away from those things. God always allows us a path to build again or hold fast. 100%. And I think it might just be a time thing. And, people always say history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And I think with that, I think you couldn't have really honestly anything much more accurate if you look at the way that they break down like the fourth turning and the turnings of time. And you just see how things play out over and over and over again. The way that there's all of these kind of odd and weird kind of parallels. It's just a fact. It's just a reality we have to live with, and it's something that will come in the ebbs and flows, and really, honestly, it's generationally, and so you can kind of only hope and put forward and hope that those ahead of you will learn from those previously. And the Titan saying, even if we have these collapses around us, totally agree though. Right. Hopefully we can be unburdened by what has been. to quote the great Kamala. Now, speaking of this specific instance, we are going to segue back into World War III, but first I have this segment from Raymond Ibrahim, and it says, it's not Islamophobia, it's the truth. Now, this is going to have direct influence or relation to not only just World War III, but also the civil strife we're seeing, and rather really just the buildup of a race war in the United Kingdom. So we'll go here. This is from Cobra on X. I know I believe it's been posted by multiple Clipper accounts. Forgive me. This is 4.5 minutes long. This is, again, I believe his name is Raymond Ibrahim. He is he's a writer. He's for the Christendom. He's written plenty of books. I think he has one in particular that's very, very popular. He has 4.4 million views on this clip alone. But again, I think it bears listening for those who are Christian, to listen to the words that's coming out of this man, and then we apply this to what's happening in the United Kingdom. So we'll go ahead and take a listen here. And again, anything wrong with the volume, up or down, let me know. I'll adjust accordingly.
You're not doomed yet, but in all of world history, there has never been a civilization that has so opened its doors to another civilization that is openly hostile to it. So this is unprecedented, what's happening. Your ancestors of Europe, and I describe it in my books because I write about history, fought tooth and nail to prevent Islam from entering and conquering Europe. because that was one of the grand plans that went on for century after century. From the east, the Turks were trying to enter the Constantinople. They surrounded Vienna in 1683. And before that, the Muslims, I told you, went up into Tours in France in 732, 1,000 years later. This was an actual goal. And now Western Europe is saying, oh, none of that matters. It was a misunderstanding. Come on in. But they haven't changed. That mentality, and when I say they, that's obviously, I'm simplifying. The mentality that I've described is part of Islam. It's an Islamic concept. So the Islamic State, you're told, oh yeah, they have nothing to do with Islam. They've twisted it. No, they haven't. They are a representation of what Islam, the caliphs, the sultanates, the emirates, that's how they operated. The heads of Islam, the grand imams and the muftis said the same exact thing. Okay, so that is what it is. Again, it's not my point to arguing, oh, well, this particular migrant wants to conquer you. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's looking for a good life. I understand that, and that's what makes it complicated. But to just open your borders completely to that demographic, which has within it, not all of it, but within it, that kernel of animosity for Christians and so-called infidels, and the imperative to conquer the world in the name of jihad for Allah, which they're the good guys, keep in mind. They never see themselves as the bad guys. This is one of the issues with all conflicts. They're not bad guys. They're good guys in their minds. You're the bad guys because you're infidels, and they're trying to bring the light of Islam to you. So that's another aspect of how moral, or the morality that they feel. They're the good guys, okay, in doing this. Because look at you, Denmark and Europe, you're all dissipated drunks and, profligates, and there's no real. I'm sharing with you their arguments because I read it and I hear it. So they're bringing to you goodness, okay? But before, your ancestors, because I guess they had their own social order and their own goodness, and it was called Christianity, were able to fight it. But I guess in this current void of sort of this atheistic climate, well, anything goes, and who's to say they're wrong? Maybe they're right, et cetera, et cetera. And now you have what's happening. So it's a very unprecedented experience. A lot of people talk about the Roman Empire, this sort of thing happened, but it didn't, and we can get into that. It was actually, they were still cognizant of trying to maintain their own social, cultural mores, Rome. And it fell to the Goths and the Germanic peoples. And I'm just saying, some people use this analogy, but in this case, this is completely your doing. Not you, but it's Europe's doing. Okay, you're bringing a hostile force that's openly hostile, and lo and behold, when I look where Muslims are, I see chaos and violence and criminality and rape and grooming in England. Okay, that's what always happened under Islam. Okay, so is there a hope? I think so. I hope so in time, but it's so bad that it even had to get to this point. It's such an abnegation and betrayal of your own heritage, of these men and women who fought and died to preserve your way of life against an open, hostile force, and now they're being welcomed in, and why not? It's okay. So I guess so. It's a matter of time.
So where's the hope? Excuse me. So where's the hope? You say there is.
The hope is to wake up, wake up and see what reality and what I'm talking about, and understand the history and the doctrine of Islam and what Islam is all about. Islam is unequivocally hostile.
Man, that was a great segment from Mr. Ibrahim there. Now, I can actually go ahead and look him up just to be sure. I'm going to actually give him his credit. Ibrahim. Yes, right here. Now, it looks like he's got a different hairstyle there, but I think it's Sword Scimitar. This is the one. Defenders of the West. It's this book in particular, I think, is the one that's been taken off for him. It's been a really good read from 2022, so only a couple years old, though. I'm going to go here. It's on Amazon. So he wrote The Christian Heroes Who Stood Against Islam. So he's actually been covering this and been in these discussions for quite a bit, but he's spot on there. Now, I think very particularly what we can say with this, and align with what he's saying here, is not even just an outright betrayal. While it is a betrayal, this comes alongside and echoes the sentiments of what many people have said even right now in the conservative space here in America and what's going on here within America. And that is that even the peoples of America not only have, one, fallen away from the one true path, Christianity, but that some of them, there's a big sect that just outright deny it and say, no, we're not a Christian nation. And that comes with things, with the loose concepts that people don't understand, that they commonly repeat, with things such as like the separation of church and state, without having any kind of grounded historical context for what that means and what the real reason it was for being installed. And then also forgetting major things, such as there being things such as state churches and different implementations along those levels. And that's just here in America. But the same thing does apply over in the UK. And I think it is quite sad, especially when you do frame it from, betraying your heritage and rather openly giving up what they fought and died for, and that's in the light of the Christendom. In another light, you take that with here in America and say we're not even going to put it in the ethics of the Christian framework. We'll put it in just simple things like World War II, where a lot of these men go out and died, for the freedoms and liberties of what was going to be, the liberal economic state at the time, or I guess the liberal world order, which is now becoming the new world order, for us to put our votes in a Chinese Dominion voting machine, to vote between, to vote for Kamala Harris, who is now a rejecting her Indian heritage, now, as Trump said, turned black. And so it's just very backwards. And when I see things like that, it does make me feel awful inside as a man, to know that there were men who probably made grave choices that led to good sacrifices, for the freedoms and for the values that they saw and believed in this country, that we have rather just let dissipate. And very particularly because there has been a lot of tolerance by Christians, but I think that comes paired not only with just tolerance, but that's paired with the fact that there have been so many people that have been poisoning the well with Christianity. Now, again, this has been, going to bang the drum on this one more time, but everybody understands this. The Jesus was nice crowd is seemingly the dominant crowd in the macro when it does come to Christians and those who consider themselves culturally Christian. It's about as far as they can understand what Jesus was, who he is, and why he was. Now, this follows the same trend line, again, with a very opening story, which is this random pastor who I find on Twitter trying to affirm or say that Jesus affirmed intersex peoples in a defense for what's happening in the Olympics. Again, all of this stuff is just kind of, it poisons the well. It's outright heretical, in my opinion. And it speaks to volumes to what Raven is saying right here. Now, he's being particular about the UK, but again, very, very parallels, because again, we all did originally come from the same place. We're just across the pond now. And if anything, Christians are the ones to blame for letting their guards down. Not for lack of better words, but I think that's the best way you kind of describe it. Letting their guards down, allowing themselves to be blinded willfully, and then not being strict enough, not being disciplinarian enough, and not honestly being authoritative enough in the right manner and measures. Honestly falling victim, in fact, to the liberal order, which is democracy, and then falling away from being so adhered to the alignment of Christian ethics and framework. So that as a lead-in, before we get into a bit of the Israel-Iranian conflict, but then we'll also cover quite a bit of what's going on with the UK. So to start, though, I am going to pick back up on where I left off previously, which I'm glad Jake Shields covered this again, too, because I don't think anyone has covered it, and nor will they, at least in these large conservative influencers. Now, Jake Shields, again, writing here, 9 IDF soldiers handcuffed a Palestine man and then gang raped him. He says Palestine man, he was a prisoner and he was picked up. For what reason, I'm unsure. They're claiming the gang rape was an act of self-defense. I don't know about you, but there's not a planet that I could be put on where someone could say that they raped those people in self-defense. That is just insane, outright insane. But again, it speaks to the fact that there is, again, I will say it once more, where is the off-ramp when it comes to these conflicts? It just continually gets worse. And then on the other hand, you get here in the States just an outright willful ignorance to cover stories on this because they understand just how publicly deteriorating that would be on favorability for Israel. Again, the sacred cow for not only just the GOP, but many on the left as well. Now, this segment even says right here, the investigation into the soldiers was launched after a detained terror suspect was brought from the base to a hospital with signs of serious abuse, including to his anus. He was arrested by the IDF in the Gaza Strip several weeks ago. The right-wing Haninu legal aid organization, which is representing 4 of the soldiers, claimed on Monday that its clients acted in self-defense in the incident. I kid you not. That is a slap in the face of justice and truly right and wrong and right and evil. That's absurd. But again, I couldn't imagine the moral kind of mental jumping through hoops that you have to do as a defense lawyer. I think if anything, that's like a position I would never want to be in, nor would I ever want to have, because I could never be the person who could turn off my morality and defend someone who I knew did great wrongs. I understand it's a position, and I understand why we have these things. But just speaking personally off the top of my head, off of opinion, like that's a job I could never do. Like I would actually turn myself in and break the attorney-client privilege and be like, hey, like, but again, you can't do that because there's huge consequences. You get disbarred and such of that nature as well. But for good reasons, to allow for privacy and such as that. It's one of these rights and privileges we have here in America that many other places do not have. Now, this is a continuation of this same exact story here before we do get a bit further. Now, this is the U.S. State Department will not call Israel raping and torturing prisoners a war crime, despite it very clearly being a war crime. Now, I'm not sure the particulars on it being a war crime, but the fact that the U.S. State Department won't at least bring attention to the matter, I think speaks volumes as well. So we'll go ahead and take a listen to this 1 minute and 15-second clip here.
Israeli police detained soldiers yesterday, or the day before yesterday, suspected of raping a Palestinian, sparking protests and so on. Apparently, rape and killing and torture and all this thing happens regularly in Israeli detention camps. Does that constitute a war crime to you?
So the reports of abuse are deeply concerning, and we have been clear and consistent with Israel and the IDF that they need to treat all detainees humanely and with dignity in accordance with humanitarian law. We also, I spoke a little bit about this earlier in the week, Said, we reiterate the support that that the IDF is investigating some of these allegations of serious abuse of Palestinian detainees, and that is news that we welcome, and we're going to let that process, and we believe in due process, and we're going to let that process play out.
2 quick points. Now, if proven to be true, that
it's just such a non-answer. Like, I'm just going to say that right there. We were very well aware of allegations happening X, and we're going to just wait until more, like, it's just such a non-answer. It's a non-statement.
that constitutes a war crime, doesn't it?
I'm not a legal expert, Said. It certainly, I imagine it would be inconsistent with Israeli law. And so, of course, that is why we have been clear that the treatment of any detainee needs to be consistent with international humanitarian law.
At least they put that forward, right? But again, I haven't seen anything since then, and probably for good reason as well, with so many other news stories overtaking this kind of very egregious, kind of slimy, reprehensible story. But again, pointing towards the fact of the reasons why there's no off-ramp and just the continual denial of these countries committing great crimes, and then once again goes back to why are we even involved in the first place? But then it goes and it hinges on the fact that many in the GOP and even a lot on the left find that a lot of Western civilization hinges on the existence of Israel, and the fact of that it falling could therefore heavily impact the Western world. I disagree with that sentiment, but again, that is the major sentiment shared by many of those who represent you and I in Congress. Now, it goes hand in hand with the rising tensions of World War III. Flights canceled were to Lebanon amid the war. You can see here just a nice little screenshot of all these cancellations. And right now, I believe Mario Nafal is covering live because they believe an Iranian attack is imminent. You can actually see that right here. He's covering and hosting there too. Partially, make sure that nothing got disconnected here. And a lot of it too. Okay, that's odd. A lot of it too is the fact that Iran is just straight up kind of like telegraphing, I guess, that they will be attacking, although not specifics of like when and where and how. I will say this, because I don't remember the news source to back it up on here, so I'll just put my face on it. And I could be entirely wrong. As far as I understand, if you remember the initial attack that happened when Iran sent a bunch of drones over, And it was like drones and rockets, and it was like a 97 or 98% defense rate from the Iron Dome for those rockets. Some believe that was a test run, and what they're going to do this next time around is in fact find these high points, or the points that are harder for the Iron Dome to defend against in at least high volumes of attacks, and they're going to send a bunch of blank ammunition in an attempt to get the rockets out of the space to find open points to fire in. So I guess, in other words, Iran is planning, as far as I've seen and reported allegedly, planning to fire a bunch of blank ammunition in an attempt to overpower the Iron Dome and then send in rockets once they have found the weak points once again. And that's what I've been seeing reports of allegedly. Again, forgive me because I could not find the post that I had found, so I could be entirely wrong on that. But again, it's just speculation on a way that Iran is going to take them on, given the fact that they are not yet a nuclear power as far as we understand. So it seems to be, and I think Phoenix Ammunition was the one who spoke on this, their best effort forward, or their best way to attack moving forward, would be to use this army of drones, the ones that they can mass produce that cost around 20 to 40K a piece, compared to putting everything into one lump sum with the nuclear rocket for it to just be shot down by the United States or Israel in some form. And then again, you just waste your money and then you have no leverage to fight back. So I will go to this though. This is a couple hours ago, actually, probably 2 or 3 hours ago now at this point, from Nick Sortor. 2 rockets have struck the US's Ain al-Assad in Iraq, which houses American troops. And if you're not aware as well, American troops are already heading to the Middle East. I believe they announced there was about 4,000 Marines, 4,500 Marines are on their way there. I believe the Roosevelt aircraft carrier is there right now. And then it's due to change rotations with the Abraham Lincoln, the USS Abraham Lincoln. So they're clearly preparing to at least be of some assistance if things happen. The rockets were allegedly fired by proxies of Iran and not Iran themselves. So again, probably just like smaller terror groups, terror cells, unsure of that. Nick Sortor, though, makes a good point, which is we're on the brink of World War III and Biden is nowhere to be found. Fantastic. Now, we just have this clip here. We'll go ahead and take a listen to it. And everyone, up on the screen. And again, I will say for like the millionth time, if anything's wrong with the sound or up or down, let me know. I will adjust it accordingly.
Everyone, I'm Bill Hemmer in today for Martha, and welcome to the story. Moments ago, 2 rockets reportedly fired at a base in Iraq that houses U.S. troops. That's according to Reuters. The United States military, now about 2,500 forces in the country of Iraq. And the last time this happened, the U.S. responded several days later. Now, that's happening as President Biden meets with his national security team in the White House Situation Room, and the U.S. reportedly warning allies Iran could attack Israel as soon as today. Now, Iran's threatening to retaliate for the killing of a Hamas leader in Tehran last week.
And as well, the Hamas number 1 and number 2 have both been confirmed killed. The number 1 being Ismail Hayden, I think is his name, and I can't remember the second one. The number 2 was actually killed in Beirut in Lebanon. If those who missed that, there was also a airstrike that occurred in Beirut that took him out. Now we're all waiting on the edge of our seats, particularly because Iran promised, and I mean the promise, they tweeted about it too, that the attack will come by Wednesday. So people are waiting for it to happen in the next couple of days because as far as we are understanding with the reports, it's going to be a multi-day attack. So expect to get major breaking news in the next coming days, if not tonight, about this.
And that was one daring mission. Now the Pentagon sending more warships and more fighter jets to the Mideast to help protect American forces and ultimately to defend Israel yet again. We have 2 retired.
And I hate to keep pausing it, but to make that point even more heard, you can see right here up to Israel, but you can see the Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group is over here. And as far as I understand, they're sending the Lincoln over here to change positions, so that we won't have two carriers, but they say rotation. It could be just a ploy to be like, oh, they're only going to have one, and then they fudge 2. But just a point to be known that the U.S. military is moving in response to what's going on.
Our general standing by, former U.S. CENTCOM Commander Joseph Votel and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Philip Breedlove. But first, let's go to the region, Tel Aviv, and our correspondent Alex Hogan for the latest at this moment. Alex, good evening there in Tel Aviv.
Hi, good evening, Bill. Good afternoon to you. So we're following the breaking news about these 2 rockets fired at the Ain al-Assad air base in Iraq that houses some U.S. forces. We'll continue to follow that. But here in the region, a lot of tension as the country, as the whole Middle East is bracing for what could be an Iranian attack. A lot of questions as to specifically when that would take place. But Iran answering some of those questions by saying that it will happen and it will be severe. But let's take a look at this. This is the U.S. force in the Middle East, the current U.S. Navy assets as Washington ramps up its military might to support Israel's defense. Now, today,
the reason why it could be so imminent as well is the fact that obviously the time difference. And so they said right there, 10 p.m. EST when she was reporting, not EST, but 10 p.m. when she was reporting then, it was actually 3 o'clock here in Eastern time. And so seeing how we're it's probably about 7 or close to 8 o'clock right now, I think that would put it at 5 hours after 10. So it's probably 3 in the morning, which if you would expect some kind of major attack to take place, it would probably come in the dead of night.
Today, U.S. General Michael Kurilla, he's here in Israel meeting with the country's chief of the general staff, talking security and talking strategy. And President Biden today just talked with Jordan's King Abdullah in efforts to decrease some of the rising tensions here in the region, as the State Department today says it does not believe that this conflict is inevitable, but it will prepare for all possibilities.
We're at a critical moment for the region, and it is important that all parties take steps over the coming days to refrain from escalation and calm tensions.
So we have seen days of escalation on Israel's northern front between the IDF and Hezbollah as countries around the world are urging their citizens to leave Lebanon. At the same time, the world is delivering medical aid. The World Food and Infrastructure is delivering 32 tons of aid, specifically trauma kits and things like that, that they can prepare to have hospitals fully staffed for any potential tension that boils out. So here in Israel.
Terrifying thought too. And again, being on the cusp of World War III, my heart goes out to any, seriously, any and all innocent people who are going to be caught in the crosshairs. I've already seen some very, very traumatizing, I hate to use the word traumatizing, but very, very awful videos coming out, even from what's happened previously between Israel and what's going on in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And who's to say how much of those are doctored and fake? But for every 10 fake ones, you have to imagine there's probably one real one. And seeing some of those kids injured in the ways that they are, is awful on both sides, right? It's just something you don't want to see. It's just we want to get to the fastest we can get to a non-violent, conflict resolution. But again, these concepts become incredibly harder to stretch to these individuals, given the fact that the foundations for why they are fighting tooth and nail against each other has such ecclesiastical foundations, particularly the fact that they just outright oppose each other much deeper than even what a racial hate would provide, but a religious kind of fervor in that too. So again, heart goes out to that. But again, I don't see an off-ramp, and we can only probably expect these to continue to escalate into worse and worse. And hopefully that doesn't mean we get to watch American soldiers leave the country and go die in another foreign war for reasons unbeknownst to anyone else outside of just because Israel's our greatest ally. Now, to go and make this point even more heard, we had Alex Jones and Nick Fuentes this morning at about 1 or 2 p.m. And I caught this clip actually from Galactic's Croy. I watched it in its entirety as much as I could, but actually go ahead and bring this up now. Go ahead and take this off screen. This is a clip because Alex Jones specifically is coming on, not onto the side of Nick Fuentes, but he is someone who at least sees what Nick Fuentes puts forward as being plausible, particularly in the influence of Israel. Now, Alex Jones even puts forward, he doesn't agree 100% with Fuentes, and I don't either. But he does see a lot of what he puts forward as being entirely plausible and probable for reasons why we shouldn't be involved, period, and what those consequences may be. Now, this particular one is about the influence and how it has its hold over America. And for the audience's interest, for the specific lives of the Marines who are already being sent over there, and hopefully in a hope that we don't see a draft in the coming weeks, months, if that were to escalate to that point. So we'll go ahead and take a listen here.
I mean, you really think Israel is out of a pie of 100% influence over the U.S., how much does Israel have influence? What's your view? Because I don't know, but I mean, like 30%? You saying more?
I'd say it's very high. And I would have said less before October 7th, but you've really seen them exert their influence over the universities, over Congress. You know, it's like people always say, I make everything about Israel. And, you know, that's a fair criticism. But after the April attack against Israel, Republicans shut down Congress from October 1st until April 13th. They said, we're not going to give money for Ukraine until the Democrats agree to cut spending and do border security. But when Israel got attacked on April 13th, they split up the bills. They passed all the appropriations. Ukraine got their 60. Israel got their 28 billion. Taiwan got their 7 billion. It happened like that. Yeah. And it's like, that's when it tells you that that's clearly their priority. You know, when Israel says jump, they say how high. You know, and Thomas Massey said that they all have their guy. And you're right, because I think you're absolutely right. The Chinese are a problem. They have infiltrated our country, you know, and I think, you know, a lot of my people say, well, you never criticize Israel, but you do. And maybe your people say, well, I don't criticize China, you know, but I do too. So you're right. It's a complicated world, and there are different intelligence agencies and different interests.
And Israel is the biggest seller of our secrets to China, and I've always pointed that out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you've talked about the liberty and everything, you know, so nobody can accuse you of not being forthright on those things. But the big concern for me is this thing with Iran. I think the Iran conflict, that's where it's being pushed the most with Netanyahu right now. This is a wild man. It's like you said, they're threatening to blow up Turkey. These people, they talk about the Iranians being irrational. They talk about the mullahs in Iran wanting an apocalypse. Well, if you're talking about going to war against Turkey and Iran at the same time, it sounds like you want the apocalypse.
Well, you do got to give it to Israel. I mean, they are very competent at assassination and sabotage and all this stuff. I mean, it's crazy. And my view is, let's not blow the world up, because I can see Israel getting destroyed in this. I don't have some hard on at night wanting to destroy Israel. But at the same time, I see my family and my life, and I don't care who they are, neocons, liberals, conservatives, they want World War III. I don't like it. I'm tired of it.
And a great point that I don't think is going to be brought up here in this clip, but it also came from the same exact segment, was really two things. You know, the first one being, you know, we're not in the Middle Ages anymore. So this idea of the isolationist, and in being an isolationist country, that we're also not at least aware of what other countries are doing is kind of absurd. And I think the way that he put it was, you know, you may not be interested in the Middle East, but that doesn't mean that the Middle East is not interested in you. And so I think with that goes, because so much of societal function across every country, including many forms of infrastructure, does rely on some form of a global net or some kind of maybe even possible global connection, at least in the first world countries as they sit right now. I think it's a really fair point. And I think that actually goes to say, even if we were to go into kind of say, okay, no interference in foreign wars, we're not going to do any of this, there still should also be a wary eye that is vigilant in understanding what still is the going-ons of these countries and their interest in us, and what those diplomatic relation breakdowns, depending on which either side, would mean for its impact on the U.S. We'll go ahead and play the rest of this out, though.
Me neither. Yeah, it's going to be over for America. I mean, we totally forfeited all of this treasure that we had after the end of the Soviet Union. Like, we dominated the world after 1991, after the USSR collapsed. We squandered all of it with this financialization in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I do believe we have a chance to turn things around. People are always asking, is it too late? Are we too far gone? It might be, you know, but there's always wiggle room. I think that there is a chance that we could turn things around. But if we're involved in another 10 years in the Middle East, it's going to be really over for this country. We're way too overextended, and we will meet the same fate of other empires.
Well, I mean, you really...
And, you know, this is actually when Titan joined in when I was talking about history repeating itself. And I think that was the second point I was going to bring up, seeing how similar it is to what occurred in 2001, right? The casus belli that was 9/11 that led us into Afghanistan and Iraq early on, is exactly what I was thinking of when I was watching these clips again. Like, are we really going to do the same exact thing once again, you know, not even 20 years down the line, where we all go get involved in foreign wars over these supposed things that no one can really confirm or prove without a shadow of a doubt, and thus we don't even really have a say, because now there's already military involvement over there. It's already happening. It's already partially out of our hands. It's already occurring as it is. And so it's just rather unfortunate because that was, to loop back to what when Titan had joined in his comment earlier. That's what I mean when I see, are we truly doomed to constantly make these same mistakes, and especially ones that are on such a global stage, especially when we have X now, when so much footage of 9/11's out, so many people are overtly, forgive me when I can't speak, they're overtly public and explicit with their thoughts about 9/11 and how people question the narrative. You even have Joe Rogan going on his new stand-up show, Base or whatever it's called, but he's just straight up like, I don't even know if we landed on the moon. And to see that sentiment is also happening at the same time, we're about to repeat the same exact mistake that led to so much ridiculous overreach and government problems, let alone what happened economically, financially, but also what led to things such as the Patriot Act and reasons why J6ers are experiencing what they are now. It's like, there's no way we are doing this again, right? Like, no way we fall into this trap one more time. And I'm hoping that the majority of people do open their eyes and wake up, because that seems to be really the only solution, and do echo what Raymond Ibrahim had said earlier in his section. But I will show you this too afterwards. A few hours ago, Trump said this regarding this, saying Israel is going to be attacked tonight by Iran. And that was from today, from 2:30 p.m. It has 1.2 million views, which is why I don't think Donald Trump has some kind of specific privy information to what is going on in Iran. But I think most people expect it to be happening at some time soon. So to move away from the World War III global aspect, and we'll kind of hone in a bit more on what's going on in the United Kingdom to finish up here. We're going to actually open up with the Prime Minister addressing the violence. Many people, when they first saw this, I'm going to switch screens real quick. Many people, when they first saw this, what was going on, they couldn't believe their eyes, or rather, they couldn't believe their ears. As many large accounts called this man to be a traitor, the Prime Minister. Particularly one of the larger accounts, Sargon of Akkad, who is Carl Benjamin, who again is a very, very notorious, I can't say notorious, I guess maybe that's the right word, because he's disliked and liked equally, I would find, especially because a political figure, also has been, slamming the wall against the rhetoric that's been coming out of the party, especially a lot of what's going on with the UK government, honestly being very upfront about there being sides in this conflict. And in particular, it's going to actually kind of go back and reflect upon some of the stuff that Nick Fuentes said as well. And I'll tell you right now, I think more often than not, and I think particularly, the strife is being bubbled up because it is on a racial basis. I think particularly that rings true in the UK. I think that's actually coming here to the US as well. I mean, it's already here. What am I saying? But in the particulars of the UK, it is definitely racial. But what's seemingly being astroturfed is that it's Islamophobia, and that it's actually like religious based, where I think more often than not, you would find the average person's probably cares less that they believe in Islam, but cares more that they're simply just not, they just don't look like them, they don't share the same values as them, which therefore stems closer to a racial kind of difference and discrimination than it does Islamic. And you'll see a bit of what I mean here as we go through some of these slides here. But first, we do have Prime Minister Keir Starmer's full address to the nation about the riots on Britain's streets. We'll go here right now. And again, anything wrong with the sound, please let me know. I'll adjust accordingly.
Those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online. Right now, there are attacks happening on a hotel in Rotherham. Marauding gangs intent on law-breaking, or worse. Windows smashed, fire set ablaze, residents and staff in absolute fear. There is no justification, none, for taking this action.
Now, I would like to point out too, especially for the audience, I can imagine that you could also probably share the sentiment. How long or how many years do you think that you've been hearing about the stabbings and the gang raping and the grooming gangs going on in the UK. And not once did you ever see an address from the prime minister that ever reached this level of vitriol towards the people engaging in those actions. But the one time you have a pressure valve release where people finally decide to stand up for themselves, largely white and what's being denominated as far right. I mean, who knows? I haven't been able to verify many of that. I mean, I think a lot of people put the blame on Tommy Robinson, but we'll get into that. And again, it shows you that the government has essentially already picked its side. And I think really when a lot of people hear this rhetoric being espoused against them for once they stand up for themselves, amid all of the immigration and violence and senseless violence at that, these words cut like a knife to those who have been living through it and going through it, which I think is why you see so many people just outright being like, you are a traitor.
And all right-minded people should be condemning this sort of violence. People in this country have a right to be safe, and yet we've seen Muslim communities targeted, attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, Nazi salutes in the street, attacks on the police, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric. So no, I won't shy away from calling it what it is, far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice. Our police deserve our support as they tackle any and all violent disorder that flares up. Whatever the apparent cause or motivation, we make no distinction. Crime is crime, and this government will tackle it. Thank you. So, 2 questions, Rob.
Now, I'm not going to even care to listen to the questions, but that was his address, and I didn't really even realize there was a larger clip portion. I thought it was just the 2.5-minute version. Hey. The sentiment really that was going back and forth yesterday, and there's really 2 large camps that are speaking to this, and Fuentes is kind of leading the one. How do I put this? There's 2 big camps, really, okay? There's the one camp, which is closer to the Groypers, the Fuentes' crowd. Forget, my beard looks pretty bad. And then you have the bigger camp, which is essentially the rest of the dissident right, or the right wing in general. The larger camp believes that this is organic. They believe that the sentiment has been building up for a while. I think that is true. But in terms of the particulars, many people in the camp that think it's inorganic find this to be a chance to not only just engage in another January 6th kind of event where now all these people's faces and names all get recognized, all these pourings of videos, all of these people will now be, essentially deemed and dinged as far-right thuggery, or really in their terms, probably more so close to terrorists. And the reason why I think the Fuentes crowd finds it to be inorganic, and at least in their argument, I am not on that side. I find that the sentiment that these people share is probably definitely very, very real, especially amid the migrants stabbing those 3 kids and a lot more. It was really 3 kids that passed away. Many more were injured in that stabbing attack from, again, an immigrant. It wasn't from a native. I think 2 things can be true at the same time. I think that not only can that sentiment be there from these people and them come out of their woodwork and see other people engaging in that violence and burning down these hotels like the Rutherford and other instances in like Leeds and Southport, but also that it could have been stirred up and initiated from a truly inorganic source. And that's where Tommy Robinson comes in, who is this big far-right figure, who is also a known Zionist, who has been pointed out by Nick Fuentes as well. Now, I know people don't like these terms, but again, the show is offensively accurate. I will be as honest with you as possible. That's where you were getting into what he's dinging as the inorganic astroturf portion of it being, why is it seemingly that they're only pointing out, again, like what we saw in the address we just watched, attacking the mosques, attacking the Muslims, when really the sentiments against the immigrants and the disparity or lack of shared values, where he's saying oh no, it's because they hate them because they're Muslim. And that's where it doesn't make sense, where it's like, okay, I understand why these people don't like the immigrants. Same thing's happening here in the States. But again, in the United States, everybody just like would deport them all. They're not sitting there saying they hate Islam. They're saying they hate that their country is being invaded by people who don't share their American values. But all of a sudden, it's like this vibe shift is happening. I hate that I even said that. Is happening in the UK, where it's seemingly being only denoted as the far right's opposition to Islam and Muslims as a whole, as a religion, and less so about the actual color of their skin, the shared values, and the actions they engage in. So again, and we'll continue with this, right? So we'll go to here. The racial tensions continue. And so let me go ahead and knock some of these out here. And this is this particular individual who did, in fact, stab these, or killed 3 little girls, and he injured 10 others with a knife at a Taylor Swift themed dance party, or class, I guess is what he's saying here. And I can move myself out of the way. The photo they're using, which is all, oh, look at this scholarly lad. And then the actual, I don't think he looks really too bad there, but clearly the photo they're actually using on the left is to make him seem a bit more innocent and appeal to the public a bit better, as if like, oh, he's just like this troubled individual who just like had a hard time. And again, it's one of these instances where you just don't hate the media enough. It was like, do you think that the kid on the left is the one who engaged in this? No, it was the guy who was on the right, but they're trying to appeal as best they can with the emotional appeal by using the imagery on the left. Now, and this is a constant thread. They do this here in the States too. They do this only, as far as I can see, only with minority groups such as blacks and Hispanics and blacks and browns, whatever you want to call it. And again, to engage in an effort to minimize the impact of their violence and criminal activity as much as they humanly possibly can. Now, here's an 11-second clip from on-the-ground footage just to show you just the level of which the aggression is going, because I haven't put anything on air yet of what's happening. Now, I'm not going to play it in its entirety. We can just take a look at this. You can see the fire raging. Now, this is just of a protest that happened in the street. It looks like burnt tires there. As far as I understand, there have been 2 hotels that were specifically designed, or not designed, that were specifically tasked with housing migrants as facilities, were both burned. Not all the way to the ground, but they were attacked and burned. And you can see here, this is just some of the street activities going on between the 2 vast mobs of people, one of which being largely Islamic and of the migrant foreign crowd, and the other being a bunch of white natives, which again goes back to it being a issue and tension between the colors of their skin, and less so about the actual religious differences between the 2 groups. Now, to echo this sentiment, though, it's a trap, bring in Admiral Akbar. This is Alex Jones. And you get another instance there we'll play here in just a second, but he says, I understand why the people are mad, but they are walking into a trap. Now, this one went viral, 4.2 million views, 40,000 likes. I mean, Alex Jones can, honestly, anything he touches turns to gold, really. I mean, because he's just that polarizing. But again, he echoes the sentiment that once this pressure valve is kind of released, and all of these people kind of, get their anger out, it's going to be a massive sweep of all of these people, the majority of them white. I doubt many of the Muslims or the foreigners will be gathered up in the same regard, and they will be imprisoned for Lord knows how long due to their far-right thuggery, as the Prime Minister put it. Now, again, we don't need the sound for this too, but this is the Rutherford that was besieged. Now, what you don't see on clip here, because this isn't the right one, but this was the hotel. It was the first one that was set ablaze by the far-right protests, because, again, they are showing that they don't want the immigration there. Again, if it was about Muslims, I would imagine I would be seeing a lot more videos about mosques and Qurans being burnt. I've not seen a lot of that. It's really only pointing to the fact of the immigration policy in which they heavily, heavily dislike. Now, as I'd already said, there are 2 camps of thought on this, and one much larger than the other, one being that everything is organic, period, and the other being that there might be a possible false flag and inorganic, which really means that Nick Fuentes and Keith Woods versus everybody else. So he even had an appearance on Alex Jones, which I put that earlier, but here's some of his tweets, actually, to echo some of these sentiments here. This is from Fuentes. He says, another wave of astroturfed anti-Muslim sentiment right before the Muslim false flags that bring us to war against Iran and ISIS. Textbook, my prediction, 0 deportations and 2 more wars for Israel. Again, not my prediction. That is from Nick Fuentes. But I see where he's coming from. Given the rhetoric coming from the prime minister and from the government officials too, it seems like they're also kind of backing that up. Now you can see this top comment, which he didn't even get ratioed, but the top comment here says rare Nick L. Now, this is also where I can find both of these ideas to be plausible. And if you're asking me to, I guess I would need to see a bit more, but I can see both of these ideas being plausible. One, that it's completely organic, and that it's just the prime minister doing their best attempt to just like say like, oh, they just hate Muslims without a connection to what that may mean. But the timing, you have to admit, is kind of curious, seeing how we are on the verge of some kind of global conflict with the Middle East. Once again, similar to what you saw during 9/11, a ridiculous rise in the sentiment of being anti-Muslim and anti-Islam, and this to go along and pair alongside it. If you're asking me, I think both are very plausible, and I think he brings up a very good point, which is could be not even just a false flag, but that this event is simply being used as a stepping stone to catapult everyone's heart and soul into the war and to be very anti-Muslim, given the fact of how it's being played out. So some more sentiment in another tweet from Fuentes to continue this, just to bring his argument to perspective, because it's not being, I guess it's the lesser known argument about this, and seems to be more people are currently just kind of accepting that it's all organic. Fuentes says, 1, the UK Labour government drops opposition to the ICC arrest warrant for Netanyahu. 2, the UK Labour government imposes secret arms embargo against Israel. And 3, Zionist Tommy Robinson holds massive rally, triggering nationwide civil unrest. So again, all of these things pointing to relaxing on Israel. Meanwhile, the sentiment being of anti-Muslim going down, paired with, once again, the global conflict that we're just sitting on the precipice of, as you just saw, with American carrier groups and Marines heading to the Middle East right now. Again, in preparation to ensure that the people give their pre-programmed consent of like, oh yeah, I do hate Muslims, let's go bomb them. And I think maybe that's what they're playing on, and that seems to be what Nick's argument is here, is that in fact, it's really just an excuse to get a lot of people in that party arrested to then catapult a global conflict, which I can see, and to be honest, it's happened before. It's probably going to happen again. So again, I find his argument to be plausible. I'm not convinced one way or the other. Again, I'm somebody who waits till the last minute to confirm something. I don't like to make predictions, but I mean, I will give predictions as well. It's not like I won't. But in this issue particular, with so many moving pieces, I just think it's too hard to tell. But I think it's, to be objective as possible, I'm going to give you both sides of everything I'm seeing. So to aid Nick Fuentes' sentiment, though, I will bring you this, because again, it's another thing I'm not seeing being reported. And this is going to the sentiment of the fact that October 7th was itself a false flag to help garner the anti-Muslim sentiment here in the States. He says here, and I mean around the globe too, I act like the States is the most important thing. This is from Leading Report. Breaking: 9 United Nations staff may have been involved in the October 7th attack on Israel, according to the UN. Again, something which is very recent, it's only from 3 p.m. today, but I think that aids the plausibility of what Nick Fuentes is saying, which is if there was actual outside interference that led to the impact or led to the October 7th attack occurring, I think that actually speaks to the fact that it could have been a false flag orchestrated by other global powers that be in order to drum up once again that sentiment needed to send the United States to war, which would be a vast sentiment of being anti-Muslim, one of which you would have seen again shortly after 9/11. Now, to move on from this though, I have this saying, black pills for everybody. Keith Woods and Fuentes, they're not sold on the social stunts of what Trump is doing as well. And this is going to be kind of a harsher segue away. But again, I think this speaks to a lot of astroturfing and what is going on in the digital economy. A lot of people just don't buy, truly. I mean, and this speaks to, kind of like all these crazy weird videos you see of like these crazy cat ladies. And they're saying, oh man, like we're going to lose the election. Look how many crazy cat ladies are making fun of JD Vance. And it's like, I don't really buy that. Because at the same time, it's like, do we really forget how 2020 happened? I mean, dude, bro, we literally have a graph of Wisconsin that's like, dude, up and over. It's like, bro, they stole it, you know? And like, I mean, like, and I'll put my chest on that. Like, they literally rigged the election. They said it themselves in a news article. They fortified the election as best they could. And to think that that reality might not happen in a more egregious manner is like, come on, dude. The United States will definitely do some stuff like that. Or let me put it better. The deep state would definitely do something along those lines. And so when you see sentiments like this following Trump going on Aiden Ross's show and, you know, the live stream, does it really have an impact? I'm not sure. I think it would probably sway some people, you know, because those people who may be like, I like current thing, and they see Aiden Ross, an influencer of usual current thing, being hippy dippy with Donald Trump, could possibly swing some momentum back in his favor, particularly with the youth, because I believe Aiden Ross does have a much younger demographic of people that he reaches. But just to make the point, though, this is Keith Woods saying this will have absolutely no effect on the election outcome. I can't go that far. I would imagine it would have some sway, but maybe minimal or marginal. And if that is the case, then maybe what is the point of this? Maybe there are better avenues to go and actually push for. Perhaps maybe Donald Trump coming out with a crazy kind of statement on what's going on in the UK and giving a support to the far-right thuggery, and to back up his parallel view of mass deportations he would implement here in the States. Wishful thinking, I guess, on my end. And then you have, you're wrong, Keith, it will. He says, no, I'm right, it won't. But I actually had another bookmark tweet here from Fuentes. Forgive me, I can't speak right now. He says, it's just a temporary bump. It's just one Bloomberg poll. We're not weird. She only filled a stadium by twerking. Trump still has 53% on PredictIt, but Aiden Ross steamed with Trump, and he says, you are here, there at the bottom. Now, I will say, that's very true. Ever since the assassination attempt, what seemed to be, oh, it's in the bag, oh my gosh, literally dissipated overnight, and now we're back to it's a hand toss, it's up in the air, which I think speaks volumes to the fact that Trump kind of fumbled the momentum that he had there, by kind of backing away from his actual morals, or at least his 2016 energy, something that I'm not even seeing that much of, and I wish I was. And just again, to be objective and show you that there are those who are inside the dissident right, who are closer to circles of where I'm at, that find this to be honestly a bit of a joke. And that's where Nick Fuentes and Keith Woods are coming from. And again, I think once you're in the fifth generational warfare aspect where we are here right now in this moment in time, and probably for the last few years, if not even a bit longer than that, it really is hard to tell how much of the internet truly does impact people. Now, obviously, it has big sways and little sways, but when it comes to the election, and then with us being blinded by what can occur with the voting machines and mail-in voting, and absentee balloting, and things of that nature too, it's hard to say how much of the slight bump in voting you may get from an Aiden Ross stream would compare to a fortification of the election, given that they get the chance to do so. Especially then we see, I believe it's in Maryland, is assigning an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot to every household. And then they're also at the same time pulled back their voter ID requirement, meaning that they're just literally sending out ballots that can be filled out by anybody and with no verification process afterwards, blatantly opening a path for illegals to get a chance to vote in our election and sway it, while only receiving benefits from it and putting nothing into it. So again, some kind of black-pilling sentiments. I'm not trying to end on a bad note, but to give everyone all sides of everything that I'm seeing and put it in the best kind of purview that I have, because again, I do find both of these to be plausible. I'm not someone who's very, very tribal in any aspect when it comes to any camp. I'm really my own person when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So I try to just give my take without consuming what other people kind of just put out, and then just think of in my own head organically what I think of the situation. Now, we'll say Fuentes continues here. He says, the Trump campaign is in need of a serious course correction. It is now undeniable that Harris will be competitive, and the Trump campaign has been losing momentum since Biden dropped out. I agree 100%, and I think, if anything, the fact that in the PredictIt market, the polling market, which is the most voluminous of all markets when it comes to this, at least has the most people betting in them in its current time frame, shows that it's a toss up between Kamala Harris and Trump, is kind of breaking the all of the sentiments put earlier in the year, where everybody said, oh man, if they have to go to Kamala Harris, they definitely can't be Kamala Harris, because no way, because people wouldn't vote for her. And then how quickly that wishful thinking dissipated, and now we're sitting here and staring at a 49% split on many polls and many predicted markets in the macro, not even swing states. It's a terrifying sentiment, and I think it speaks to how low IQ the average voter has begun. Forgive me. Because again, if you weren't with me here in the beginning, Kamala Harris has no policies she's putting forward, outside of, confiscating guns, similar to how Australia wanted to do it. But also that she can't even speak. She has no charisma. She has no background. In fact, her background, her body of work is only damaging to her career. And so to see that the public or the left rather, and which includes a lot of the public, is going to vote for her purely because she's black and a woman and she's up against Trump, speaks to how effective the brainwashing has been over the last few years. And it's honestly, truly sad. And if anything, it speaks to my argument, which is we need to figure out how we can repeal the 19th as soon as humanly possible. And I'm not going to sit here and echo, oh, these white liberal women. It's women across the board. I think Andrew Wilson had a great point with the Crucible. he brought up, it's a tragedy that your vote cancels out mine. And I thought that was a pretty good way to put it, especially because the lady was like, well, I don't know what to think about homeless people. I don't know what to think about this. And he's like, and you're going to go vote? She's like, yeah. And he's like, oh my gosh. And I think that kind of wraps it up, where it's like, you have a lot of people who vote who are very, very low information voters. Maybe not even low IQ, but people who don't pay attention. And it is a tragedy that their votes hold equal weight to someone who is in the fight all the time, who is paying attention all the time, who has a treasure trove more of information at hand and knowledge to understand how things will impact and affect in the future, and at least have a vision for that. It is tragic, and I think it speaks, even if you don't want to come and join me on the repeal the 19th argument, I think we can all agree and say we can't keep pushing forward with this idea of democracy and voting as it is right now, especially when you show all the different disparities between the different demographics. It's honestly, it's damaging this country. And Jeff Younger even commented on one of my posts not too long ago, saying cultural liberalism is worse than communism. And I'm slowly reaching that point, to be honest with you. Now, I will end on a kind of odd thing. This is the last thing I have to cover for today. I found it really, really odd too. And it's just so like gross and cringe and old man and weird and hypersexualized. So it was extremely odd and degenerate take from Bill Maher with the Haktua girl. Haktua! He pushes the idea of a sex ed podcast on her. And I mean, like, he pushes it on her. So it's been pretty controversial. And Chrissy Meyer had the tweet that went viral with it. So I'll go ahead and put it on screen right now. Let me go ahead and swing it over here right now. Let me pause it here. It's only about 1 minute and 50 seconds long. I think if you go to even the comments on this too, well, I guess not those ones, but when I saw some of the more popular people going and being angry at Chrissy Meyer for having the statement that she did, it speaks to how far away conservatives have moved from Christian frameworks and ethics, to the point that they can't even recognize or see something as being gross. I mean, you had people who were just mad, like saying like, this will be the best advice she's ever gotten. I think even, what was it, Tristan Tate said that. Again, just like, what are you on, dude? Like, really, the best advice that this girl can be given is that she should take her time and efforts and make a sex ed podcast, as if there's not like literally 40 of those already being ran by other popular and influential women. Like, that's it? That's the only advice you got? Again, I also found it creepy and disgusting and disturbing. And so we can only hope that this doesn't take the place. I mean, if anything, start a podcast about literally anything else but that. But again, we'll play this clip. And if any issues with sound, please let me know.
I got it already. No.
What you got?
You need to do a podcast. You do it right here on Club Random, if you do it my way. Sex expert. And I'll tell you why. Wait. I'll tell you why. Because you need to, I told you were given this chip. You were given the chip of fame. Now you want to trade that in for something that uses that but takes it to the next level. You have to like trade on what you're already known for. That's the one thing you're known for. So you could do a podcast for, like, I don't know if there's anything from somebody that age with that point of view, but it couldn't be frivolous. You have to take it seriously. Could you do that?
Possibly.
And talk about sex, but seriously, serious issues, because there are a lot of really serious issues. I mean, you know, there's one that's related to what made you famous.
Yep.
What am I going to say? You have no idea what I'm going to say.
I don't know. I don't know where this is going. I'm kind of
Okay, I'm going to
nervous.
tell you where it's going. You learned that thing about spitting.
She seems very, very uncomfortable. But again, it's not even about sex ed. He goes right to talking about to sexual performance instead of sexual education. It's just insane. It's so gross.
From porn. That's where that came. What? You did. Maybe not directly, but trust me, like that, the idea of spitting, first of all, it's gross. It's not necessary. It never existed before porn. Do you know that? Do you realize that?
Yeah.
And porn is not benign. It is not. And it has warped the minds of the kids in your generation, especially the guys.
Yeah, they come up with some sick shit.
Yes.
People are just.
Yeah, no, I know they are. People are fucking sickos. And, you know, whatever floats your arc, but.
Whatever floats your work.
I don't know. If you're asking me, I think that she could probably start a podcast about many, many other things. She could probably start one where she's a guest co-host on like a true crime episode. That's one of the popular subjects for women. I mean, I think he's right when he was talking about the stemming from porn. But to push someone, you know, as young as 21 years old, if you see here on screen, to be a sex ed expert, you know, and turn your 15 minutes of fame as this chip to be that, it's just like, it's only going to set her up to be taken advantage of. It's only going to set her up to fall down the path, which would become, you know, more hypersexualized, more provocative, and just outright just gross and honestly disgusting in nature. And I'm glad Chrissy Meyer took a stand on this. For some people to act as if that was the best advice she'd ever get. I mean, maybe outside of a Christian framework view, you would say maybe that's the fastest way she can get rich, and maybe the best form that she could get rich off of something like that from her 15 minutes of fame. I just don't find it to be good, godly advice. And so that's why I'm going to go ahead, man, I can't talk. Go ahead and put a pin in everything. That was pretty much the end of what I had to cover for today. I do appreciate everyone for coming in here, Titan as well, Donnie Brook as well. Thank you guys so much for supporting and being here. I do appreciate it very much. Again, on Saturdays from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., I will be co-hosting with What in the World on his much bigger channel than mine. He's at like 16,000 subscribers. We started a podcast called Jar Openers. We already did the first one from previous Saturday. So if you haven't seen that, definitely go and watch that if you would find the topics of interest to you. And also tell us how we did, you know, tell the world how we did too, not even just me as well. And hopefully we see you coming back soon. I will hopefully try to do another episode before Saturday, especially given the new setup and especially given how the veracity of the news coming out and seeing how so few people are willing to cover things from all angles, at least from the dissonant right perspective, I guess I should say. I will do my best to make sure I can do that and provide that for you guys. So again, appreciate you all very much. Thank you. Everyone have a good rest of your night. Christ is King. And let's hope we can find an off-ramp and we can do everything as non-violently as possible. But I do pray to the people and for the people in UK who are dealing with probably, again, a parallel to what January 6th was here in the States. And we're probably going to be looking down the barrel of a lot of people going to jail for the rest of their lives. And so with that, hopefully it doesn't continue like that, though. I'm going to take off. Have a good rest of your night. Take care. Peace out.